Who do you value? Seriously, I mean it. Who are the people in your life right now that you can 100% say that you care for and value? For some, you could list 100 people and keep going. Others can count them on one hand. Something you will notice across nearly all people is that they at least have an answer for this question. Sociopaths, though, are people who only value themselves and their own interests. And Ayanokoji from Classroom of the Elite demonstrates the characteristics and tendencies of sociopaths pretty accurately. And that is what we'll be discussing in today's video. Just to preface though, this video is purely an analysis on real-life sociopathic tendencies and the ways in which Ayanokoji demonstrates them throughout Classroom of the Elite. This is in no way meant to make light of the severity and debilitating impact that sociopathy can have on people. But I also don't want a bunch of self-diagnosed sociopaths in my comments section talking about how inaccurate Ayanokoji portrays sociopathy, because obviously not every example is going to fit perfectly, and of course everything in this silly show is played up for entertainment. Now that that yap session is out of the way, let's talk about what sociopathy is truly defined as in a psychological manner. Sociopathy, now formally referred to as antisocial personality disorder, is defined by the APA Dictionary of Psychology as, quote, the presence of a chronic and pervasive disposition to disregard and violate the rights of others. Manifestations include repeated violations to the law, exploitation of others, deceitfulness, impulsivity, aggressiveness, reckless disregard to the safety of self and others, and irresponsibility, accompanied by lack of guilt, remorse, and empathy. This deceitfulness and lack of empathy is exactly the thing that leads to the feeling of seeing people as just tools and objects to benefit yourself. One of the biggest ways that we see Ayanokoji directly manipulate someone without any remorse is how he manipulated Kei Kadoizawa into becoming his pawn by exploiting her trauma. Any person of sound mind would immediately rush in to help Kadoizawa from the situation she was in. But not Ayanokoji. He did not feel bad when she was being hurt. He saw an opportunity, and he made the most of it, leading her into an even more dangerous situation so that he could pounce on her and have a new tool for his greater plan. This continues all the way up to the dramatic ending of Season 2 where Ayanokoji rushes in to save Kadoizawa from Ryuin and his goons. Even though he is the one who put her in this situation in the first place, he has no guilt for making himself into a false hero for something he set up. I'm sure you're wondering though, what actually causes this disorder in people? Underneath the hood, what's truly happening? And this is exactly what's so fundamentally interesting about mental disorders in the mind as a whole. This is one of the foundational points of psychology itself, nature versus nurture. Oftentimes it's both, and that's exactly the case with sociopathy. In a research paper by Laura A. Baker, Serena Bezjan, and Adrian Rain, they state that there has been found a, quote, greater concordance for such behavior, that being sociopathy, in genetically related individuals compared to non-relatives living in the same environment. What this is specifically referring to is known in psychology as twin and adoption studies, when children are adopted and get compared to their siblings that grew up in a different environment. Through this, we are able to get an idea of what traits they are born with and those that they collect over time. So if we were to take the story of Classroom of the Elite to be real, Ayanokoji would likely have some genetic predisposition for the traits that he shows. But obviously we are given some background of the traumatic upbringing that Ayanokoji had in the White Room. This likely was one of the main things that damaged his psyche to the point of developing this mental illness. The reason that these events in childhood can impact you for the rest of your life so much is because of the lack of proper emotional development. In the White Room, he was never given proper attention as a human. He was raised to be a tool. And that is what can cause a sort of survivor mentality. In Ayanokoji's eyes, there's nothing wrong with hurting others, because he has already learned to ignore and disregard the emotions of others, as well as not forming attachments because they are not within his own interests. The purest form of this lack of emotion has actually been shown very recently in Season 4 of the anime, when Ayanokoji gets stabbed by Hosen. Not only does Ayanokoji make such a calculation to risk his own safety with no fear, but he also doesn't even flinch. Although this can easily just be played off as highly exaggerated anime silliness, which don't get me wrong, it totally is. But I also think it just goes to show how disconnected Ayanokoji is from the rest of society, and even in some ways, himself. In his plan, there is no place for him to start squirming on the ground in pain, so he simply doesn't do that. Of course, on the IRL psychological side of this, it's important to mention that obviously sociopaths do feel emotion, and Ayanokoji is just a very played up example of the devastating effects of this illness. From manipulation to emotional detachment and much more, sociopathy is nothing to make light of, but it also gives us a deeper look into how your own genetics can combine with environmental factors to create something devastating. Through Ayanokoji, we can see how these traits manifest themselves, both realistically and unrealistically. As always though, please drop a like and subscribe if you liked what you saw, and comment down below what your thoughts are of the psychological ideas portrayed through Classroom of the Elite. And of course, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.